Hi, thanks for joining me. Today we're going to be discussing the 3 eclipses that are going to occur from June 5th until July 4th. Hello, I'm Ramdas, Bill Sinclair, and I hope you'll like and subscribe to this video. So today we're going to be talking about the eclipse season that starts this year on June 5th and will be going through July 4th. And in this series of eclipses where we'll have a lunar eclipse, then we'll have the solar eclipse, and then we'll have a second lunar eclipse. So the first thing I'd like to say is that eclipses happen every 6 months. Whenever the sun is conjunct or near to one of the nodes, Rahu or Ketu, we then have eclipses as the moon moves from its new position, which is where we get solar eclipses, to its full position, which is where we get lunar eclipses. Most of the time there's only 2 eclipses, but because of the way the alignment happened at this time, the first lunar eclipse is very early into the conjunction. So we're able to get a lunar, a solar, and a lunar. But before we go any deeper into that, I would like to just kind of set the stage, because astrological interpretation has to take into account all of the factors, the conditions that we're in and everything else. And so we're in a really, when was the last time you heard something called an unprecedented time? Like last year, we never would have used that term, really. But here we are in a very remarkable time period. And so I was thinking the other day, it just takes a moment sometimes to step back and say, what is everything that's on our plate? So of course, the first thing that happened and the ongoing pervasive, stressful energy is the pandemic that is ongoing. Many places are getting it more under control, but there's now all talk of second wave stuff, things like that. The second thing is because of the pandemic, we're having financial crisis and significant, record-breaking job losses. So people are under a second stress. Many people are facing, financial insecurity and job stressors. And then recently in the US, and I believe around the whole world, there's been shocking events around police brutality to minorities in the US. Unfortunately, this is an ongoing state that we see in the United States. It's been really more formalized and more exacerbated since 2014, but it's basically 400 years of history here. So this is now emerging, and so it's caused unprecedented, there's that word again, protests across the United States. So just as we had gotten out of lockdown for the pandemic, many cities, dozens and dozens of cities are now under curfews because of the violence, and the looting that unfortunately people are stepping in to exploit the peaceful protests. So these are 3 huge social factors that we're dealing with. Then on top of that, we are going to have 2 major astrological factors. In my last video, I talked about the stress of multiple retrograde planets. And just to summarize that, basically from May until September, we have all 5 planets that can retrograde, will retrograde. Not for the whole time, but we have significant, at least 2, if not 3, planets that are retrograde at one time. So whenever planets are retrograde, that really, it increases our stress. Most of the stress comes when they're stationing, but even while they're moving backwards, it takes time to adjust. And what this does is it makes us re-examine our thoughts, patterns, ideas, beliefs, all those kind of things. So now on top of this, and these 2 are independent factors that are not at all linked, we're going to have this series of eclipses. So like I said, eclipses happen every 6 months. They can have many manifestations, but the key is that the eclipse occurs when the sun and moon are in the same latitude, that's distance from the equator, and longitude, either conjunct at the same degree or 180 degrees apart. So those are the two factors. So the sun and the moon are the sources of light and knowledge, and wisdom and life force and all this kind of stuff for us. And so when they are disturbed, it causes a disturbance on many levels. One thing to think about is that the two greatest gravitational influences on our planet are the sun and the moon. The sun keeps us in a distant orbit, and the moon keeps us steady within that orbit and within the planet itself. So you will see around eclipses, there tends to be an increase in earthquakes, hurricanes, tsunamis, like natural phenomena that can come up, volcanic eruptions, things like that, because the gravitational, forces can align and give a shifting to the structure of the Earth. Secondly, we often see that eclipses are equated to the loss of famous people and leaders of countries, things like that. So you may look for that. You'll remember around Michael Jackson, that was there was a bunch of people that, died and things like that. So that may happen. I'm not really sure why that happens. I just see that it happens. But in a personal life, our personal life, it all depends on if you have a planet on or near the degree of the eclipse. So this is why it's important to study your own chart. And if you don't know your planetary placement, there's many apps that you can download. Just be sure that you get Vedic astrology apps, because we calculate the planets different from the West. So if these degrees that we're going to talk about today are on or near one of your planets, it's more likely that you will feel the direct effects. However, I wanted to set this up because all of us will be feeling just kind of the stress, especially on the days of the eclipse. You'll feel it more likely. So what the rishis advise us when we're facing an eclipse is that you shouldn't plan to do a lot of things. Because the energy is disturbed, it's best to, I can't believe I'm going to say this, stay at home, like who has a choice in what's going on. But you should stay at home, you should keep it simple. You should, it's a good day for spiritual study, for meditation, for yoga. Go take a nice quiet walk, things like that. Avoid conflict, especially on those days. Eat very simple food. Don't eat too much, because even the disturbance affects our digestion. So, if you can, keep a simple vegetarian diet. Some people fast on these days and just take only fruit, or they may take water. So these are all the different kinds of things you should just know about. Let's look at the first eclipse. The first eclipse will occur on June 5th at 10:23 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, and it will be at 21 degrees of Scorpio. So the first thing you'll want to check is to see if you have any planets near 21 degrees Scorpio. I would say within a couple degrees on either side of it is the orb that I usually use on these eclipses. So the effects of this eclipse, like all lunar eclipses, will last for about 30 days. So we're looking about 1 month, basically right until the third eclipse occurs. The first thing we notice is that the moon is in the sign of Scorpio, where it's debilitated. So what this means is that we're likely to have a more negative emotional experience during this eclipse. It'll be increased stress. So what you're going to want to make sure that you're doing is keeping a good sleep schedule, which is key to the moon, managing the moon's energy. The lunar sign that this is occurring in, below Scorpio, is called Jeshta. And Jeshta is a very interesting sign, because the story related to it is that Indra, the king of the gods, had an affair with the guru's wife. And so he was cursed, and he had to perform penance for 1,000 years in order to have the curse lessened, so that it was, he could go on with his work. So what this tells us is that Scorpio is bringing up the results of the actions we've taken. And so we're going to have to look at bad actions we've taken in the past and put in a lot of effort in order to process those bad actions and, repair them, balance them out so that they're no longer a problem for us. This is a hallmark of the sign of Scorpio, but it's interesting that it's repeated here in the lunar sign Jeshta, which is beneath it. And then finally, we look to see in the Navamsha chart. The Navamsha chart shows us the outcomes of the actions of an event. So in this case, the moon in the Navamsha chart is in the sign of Capricorn. Now, Capricorn, again, reiterates some of the themes that we've already seen in Scorpio, and that Capricorn is the natural 10th house, which is our actions. So once again, our actions are being brought up. And the idea of Capricorn is that we have to pay back all of our debts, and we have to cash in all of our credits to help so that we're at a neutral place. So here in Capricorn, the specific area that it looks at is Capricorn is where we pay back debts to our community, where we must take care of our community, where we must foster and promote the good qualities of our community. It's opposite Cancer, and many of us know the sign of Cancer is about nurturing and caring for our family, our friends, those are people we would have in our house. Seventh from that is about how we nurture and care our larger community. Which now, in these days, it can be almost anything with the internet. I mean, we're all forming a community here of people that study Vedic astrology. So it may not be geographically centered, but it is all of our relations outside of our very intimate relationships in Cancer. The last thing to look at is what planets are aspecting the moon during the eclipse. And here we find that Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn, the three major retrograde planets, are all aspecting the moon during this eclipse. So again, this just reiterates that this could be a time for great change. It could be a time that you could look at this as a change of heart, as the moon is related to our emotions and our feeling, and three planets which are going retrograde are all aspecting this. So let's move on to the second eclipse, and this will be on Saturday, June the 20th, and it will be at 23:41 Pacific Daylight Time, so that's 11:41 in the evening. And this is occurring at 6 degrees of Gemini. So you're going to want to look at your chart and see if you have anything in or near 6 degrees of Gemini. And this is when like maybe 3 degrees, each side of it would probably be the orb that I would use. And so when the sun is in Gemini, it's a neutral sign, and his sun is neutral in Gemini, and so he can promote change on many levels. The underlying lesson of this eclipse, which tends to align with the first one, is that we have to embrace all members of our society. So the story of the nakshatra that rules this area of Gemini concerns Lord Shiva. So Lord Shiva is an ascetic, and he really doesn't participate in society a lot. He's always sitting off in his cave. And so, but he is married, and so Sita, his wife, was invited to a big fire ceremony that her father was giving. And he did not invite Shiva because her father thought that Shiva was rude and didn't really conform with society. I mean, Shiva has, he's always has matted hair, and he doesn't, really care about these external things. But Sita felt the embarrassment, and she couldn't, bear him being isolated from society anymore. So she walked into the holy fire and immolated herself. These are things you'll see in the Vedic stories. They're really interesting, and they have a lot to teach us. So when Shiva heard that his wife had died, he became enraged, and he came to the ceremony and he started to tear it up. I mean, he was setting things on fire, he was destroying property, he was going after people. So at that moment, the fire, which is its own entity, tried to escape. And so what he did is he took the form of a deer and tried to fly up into the heavens. And Shiva even then pursued him all the way and cut his head off in the sky. So we see, it's fascinating that this is happening right at a time where we're having riots and people, the outcasts, the people that are not treated fairly in society, let's put it that way, are rising up and demanding to be included. They are tired of being treated this way. And so this kind of is analogous for me to Shiva coming into the big yajna, the fire ceremony, and destroying it and pursuing it all the way up. And I've thought a lot about, well, why does he cut the head off of the deer? And I think it's because it's in our head that we make up these false divisions, where we store these prejudices and preferences and things like that, are all based on mental ideas and concepts that aren't true. By cutting off the head of the deer, he's actually freeing the deer's heart to come forward. And it's in our heart chakra, that we understand that we are all one, that everything is interconnected and unified. And so I think there's the potential here to achieve this higher level of understanding, or deeper level of understanding, I would say, if we can just get out of our own way. And so I find it very interesting, that of all the 27 lunar signs, that this is the sign that the sun is being eclipsed in this moment in time. And this is the point where the knowledge is coming forward and the lesson is emerging for all of us to learn. So let's look at the outcome of this, because in the Navamsha, again, the sun is seated in Scorpio. So Scorpio is that sign where that the first eclipse is also linked to. The first eclipse is in Scorpio. The second eclipse, the sun is seated in the Navamsha, the outcomes chart, in the sign of Scorpio. And Scorpio is all about negative past life karma that's coming to fruition. So acts that you have taken in past lives, and as a country, our collective past injustices are now up to be redressed. And so it's time that we make amends, that we refine, that we learn from this, and we move forward in a more positive way. The other thing I want to mention is that the day before the eclipse is when Sun and Rahu are exactly conjunct. So this increases the power of this particular lunar eclipse. This is the place it's going to be very potent, and in fact, it will be active until October of 2021, this point in the sky. So this is going to be an ongoing change. We're going to see great improvement, and healing is open and potential for this point through the next year and a half. So the third eclipse is going to happen on Saturday, July 4th. And it's at 19 degrees of Sagittarius. And so if you have planets around 19 degrees of Sagittarius, you're going to want to look at this chart. Now, initially I thought, oh my gosh, that's the birthday chart for the United States. And it is. But what's interesting is the chart is so old that the sun will not really reach the same degree that it is in the birth chart until like 4 or 5 days later. So I still think it will have an impact on the US, but there's nothing exactly in that chart hitting at 19 Sagittarius, or all the planets are in Gemini actually in the chart. There's a big cluster. None of them are super close to 19 degrees. But it's still going to have impact. Obviously, this is where these themes are already emerging. So, in Sagittarius, the key thing is leadership. It represents the king, the person in charge, and it represents justice. I mean, when you stack these three things up, it's really clear what they're trying to teach us, that we must really have justice for all people. And this is going to come in the third lesson at the partial lunar eclipse on the 4th of July. So the moon is in the sign of Sagittarius, which is concerned, as I said, with justice and leadership. The underlying story here is very interesting. It's because Jupiter rules the sign of Sagittarius, and the nakshatra that it's placed in, which is Purva Ashada, is ruled by Venus. We have a merging of the two gurus, the two teachers of the universe. So commonly, really what this is like when you have an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other shoulder. So you have the advisor to the gods and you have the advisor to the demons, sitting and both talking into your ear. So this is a time where we have to, again, really be looking at ourselves and understanding what are the ramifications of my actions. because whatever action we take, we must receive the consequences. So you can start to look at this and really examine it. And on our leadership, we have to be looking at what actions are they taking and what are the results likely to be. This is the time when we all must be thinking for ourselves and ensuring that the leadership we have is leading us in the right direction. And this is further confirmed because in the D9 chart, which is the outcomes chart, the sun is sitting in his own sign of Leo, the actual sign of government and the king. So we're really seeing an unusual repetition of the same things, which are about equality for all, justice for the highest form of justice. We have to atone for the actions that we have not taken in the past or the negative actions we have taken to support everyone. This is a time of crisis, as I said, with a pandemic and with the job losses, and then this continual repetition of violence in the U.S. society especially. And this is not only the important work that we have to do with how the police are functioning in this country, but we also have to consider the continual drumbeat of mass shootings that happen in this country. We have to address how can we help these people that are not getting the services, that are not getting the support they need, so that they can be part of our society and can contribute to it. And that means opening up the society to wider parameters. It doesn't mean bringing people in to make them conform. It means opening our society so that we can include the rich diversity that we have, and we can recognize each person as a unique, dynamic individual. So these are the ideas and thoughts that are going to be manifesting over the summer. I am so happy to be able to share my impressions with you. I really hope you find these helpful. If you can just take away one or two nuggets that help you support your daily life and find some peace and solace, because this is not random. I truly believe that we are being led into a time of change and progress, and that the outcome will be better. It's just very painful to go through the lessons. And right now, we tend to be getting a lot of lessons all at once. So thank you so much for watching. Namaste.